Welcome, learner, to today's deep dive. We are opening up a treasure trove of information about one of the most transformative medical figures of the 20th century, Jonas Salk.
His name is, it's completely synonymous with the victory over polio.
Absolutely. A disease that just cast this shadow over American summers for decades. But our sources reveal that his legacy is, well, it's far richer and more complex than just one successful injection.
Oh, definitely. Salk's life is a masterclass in the intersection of scientific rigor and this profound moral commitment.
And we have a lot of material to get through.
We do. We have material covering his rigorous educational path, the high-stakes, almost wartime research environment of the 1950s, and crucially, his later intellectual pivot toward what he termed biophilosophy.
Right, so this deep dive will focus not just on what he discovered, but on that enduring question of why he walked away from, well, billions in potential profit.
That's the core question.
And that's our mission today, to really extract the crucial insights from the sources on Salk's entire journey. We are going beyond the headline, beyond the simple fact of the vaccine, to understand the philosophical underpinnings of the man who famously refused to profit from his invention.
And to really appreciate the magnitude of that refusal, you first have to appreciate the scale of the threat. You have to put yourself in that context.
The fear was palpable.
It was. Polio epidemics struck almost yearly. For American families, the summer months were just marked by this profound, paralyzing fear. It wasn't just a threat, it was a seasonal terror that, it targeted children.
A unique, terrifying kind of public health crisis because it was so visible, so dramatic and unpredictable. It often left permanent disability or, required iron lungs.
Right.
So to put his achievement in stark perspective for you, less than 25 years after Salk's vaccine was announced as safe in 1955, domestic transmission of polio was eliminated in the U.S. That is a swift, monumental, and historically unprecedented public health victory. We're here to unpack the life of the virologist behind that. Okay, let's unpack this.
I think we need to start where Salk started. We have to examine the specific environment that forged such a driven, socially conscious scientist, because his commitment to public welfare, it wasn't accidental. It was cultivated from a very young age.
So Salk's foundations were laid in New York City. He was born on October 28, 1914, to Daniel and Dora Salk.
And the sources tell us his parents were Jewish, and neither of them had the benefit of, an extensive formal education. His father, Daniel, was born in New Jersey to immigrant parents, and his mother, Dora, she immigrated from Minsk when she was just 12.
And that demographic detail, it seems crucial for understanding his intense drive.
It's everything. His biographer, David Oshinsky, often emphasized that for children of working-class immigrants in early 20th century New York, education wasn't just a path to opportunity, it was the entire ladder.
The only way up.
Exactly. The lack of formal education in the parents created this powerful, almost desperate ambition for their children to succeed academically.
And Salk immediately demonstrated he was up to that challenge.
Yeah.
He entered Townsend Harris Hall Prep School at the tender age of 13.
And this wasn't just any public school. It was an incubator for exceptional intellect, specifically designed for intellectually gifted boys.
A launch pad.
A launch pad. That's a good way to put it. For the talented sons of immigrant parents who lacked the money and, let's be honest, the WS pedigree to attend a top private school.
So what was the environment like there?
The environment at Townsend Harris was designed for accelerated achievement. The curriculum was ruthless, demanding students cram 4 years of material into just 3. It was a pressure cooker.
Wow.
Totally. It was designed to test endurance and intellectual stamina. And Oshinsky's notes reveal that Salk was known as an absolute perfectionist during this period.
So not just a good student.
No, he was relentless. He was consuming every book, demanding absolute precision in his work. And that early discipline, that commitment to being right, not just fast, that becomes the philosophical bedrock of his later research choices.
That demanding environment then prepared him perfectly for the next step. The City College of New York, or CCNY, he earned a Bachelor of Science degree in chemistry in 1934, entering the college when he was just 15 years old.
15. This accelerated path was common for students who had excelled and skipped grades.
And CCNY itself was an extraordinary institution.
An absolute powerhouse, particularly in that era. It was crucial for working-class immigrant families because while it was incredibly tough to get into, tuition was entirely free.
Think about that barrier removal.
It's huge. It provided intellectual freedom without that financial burden. And our sources confirm CCNY produced a staggering amount of intellectual talent. We're talking 8 Nobel Prize winners, more PhD recipients than almost any other public college in the country.
So this system, it really reinforced the idea that knowledge was a public good.
Exactly. Freely accessible to those who prove their merit. That's a concept Salk would embody his entire life.
Now here's a surprising and, I think, illuminating wrinkle in his biography.
Yeah.
Salk didn't originally want to be a scientist or a doctor.
No, not at all. His initial interests were explicitly things human, which suggests a desire to engage with social problems. He was maybe aiming for a legal career or even politics.
So what happened?
Well, it was his mother, Dora. She provided the crucial nudge, really encouraging him toward medical school.
And this pivot, it seems to reveal the underlying driver of his whole career.
I think so. Even when studying medicine, Salk was never truly interested in the one-on-one clinical practice of healing. He recognized that if he wanted to address those things human, he needed a platform with maximal impact. His focus, even early on, was always finding a way to help humankind in a larger systemic sense.
The macro solution, not the micro one. And that larger goal dictated his choice of medical school, too. Let's talk about his time at New York University School of Medicine, as that's where his scientific destiny really took hold.
Right. The choice of NYU was strategic, not, aspirational in the Ivy League sense. Tuition was comparatively low, which was important for his family.
But there was another, more critical reason.
Yes. Most critically, NYU did not practice the rigid anti-Semitic quotas that were just rampant at Ivy League institutions like Yale. The sources paint a stark picture. In 1935, Yale accepted only 5 Jewish applicants out of a pool of 200.
Just 5.
Salk needed an institution where sheer intellectual merit was the only currency that mattered, and NYU provided that.
And merit he certainly displayed. He was an academic standout, earning the high distinction of Alpha Omega Alpha.
But instead of pursuing a lucrative clinical practice, he took a year off to study biochemistry before deciding to focus on bacteriology. He articulated his choice very clearly, saying his desire was to be of some help to humankind in a larger sense than just on a one-to-one basis.
He was already thinking epidemiologically.
He was. And this is the moment the virologist is truly born, and the influenza research provided the perfect crucible.
Right, in his final year of medical school.
In his final year, he took an elective in a laboratory studying influenza. It was an incredibly exciting field at the time. The virus had only recently been identified. But Salk wasn't just interested in identifying it. He saw a profound opportunity.
Which was?
To test whether it was possible to destroy the virus's ability to infect its virulence and still use the resulting material to produce a lasting immunization.
So that conceptual breakthrough, the idea of a killed or inactivated virus vaccine, that's the fundamental philosophical genesis of his polio strategy.
It is. It prioritized safety and stability over the complexity of live virus research.
And that early work quickly led him to postgraduate research.
Yes, at the University of Michigan with Thomas Francis Jr., who was a monumental figure in virology. He discovered the type B influenza virus. Salk and Francis worked together, perfecting an influenza vaccine for the U.S. Army.
So this wasn't just an academic exercise. This was high stakes.
Very high stakes. A rapid deployment proving ground during wartime. Salk even discovered and isolated one of the included strains of influenza that went into the final formulation.
So this early success, it proved 2 things.
It did. It proved his methods worked on a large scale and that his method for inactivation was reliable. This period was the conceptual and practical dress rehearsal for the ultimate fight against polio.
So by 1947, Salk was ready for his own laboratory and his own mission. He accepted a professorship at the University of Pittsburgh School of Medicine.
And our sources note that he initially found the university rules restrictive. His lab was smaller than he wanted, but, his ambition was just too large to be contained by bureaucracy.
And that ambition soon found a massive target.
The opportunity arrived in 1948, and it originated from the most powerful public health organization of the time, the National Foundation for Infantile Paralysis, which FDR had established.
And his initial task wasn't even to create a vaccine, was it?
No, it was a critical first step, though deceptively simple. Determine the number of different types of poliovirus. This was essential because a successful vaccine needed to target all circulating strains, and the scientific community was still debating the total number.
And it turned out there were 3 distinct types.
3 types. Once that foundational knowledge was established, Salk essentially dedicated the next 7 years of his life entirely to the singular goal of vaccine development. He was just relentless.
Securing grants from the Mellon family.
And building a world-class virology laboratory in Pittsburgh, bringing together a brilliant team that included key colleagues like Julius Jungner and Lorraine Friedman.
And the pressure was immense.
Oh, immense. This wasn't just a lab project. It was a societal mobilization driven by deep, pervasive fear. The National Foundation, powered by the collective emotional and financial weight of the March of Dimes, eventually went into deep debt.
A staggering financial commitment.
Absolutely. All to finance the final, critical research stages for Salk's vaccine. Salk himself worked incessantly, focusing his team's efforts on the final push for 2.5 years without a single break.
This intense dedication leads us directly to the core scientific dilemma of the time. Salk's critical choice regarding the vaccine mechanism itself, the killed virus approach.
And this was the defining methodological and, philosophical decision that set Salk apart. You had two major camps in virology at the time.
Okay.
On one side was Salk advocating for the inactivated polio vaccine, or IPV, using a killed virus that could not replicate or cause disease but still provoked an immune response.
And on the other side
Was Albert Sabin, who was developing an oral vaccine using weakened or attenuated live virus strains, the OPV.
So Salk stuck with the killed virus approach he had refined during the influenza research because of one paramount factor: safety. Why was the killed virus approach considered inherently safer?
Well, that's the critical technical distinction. A live attenuated virus like Sabin's, it mimics a natural infection and generally provides stronger, more enduring immunity in the gut.
Right.
But, and this is the huge risk Salk refused to tolerate, a live virus carries a small but measurable theoretical risk of reverting back to a virulent, paralyzing form once it's inside a human host.
I see.
Salk's IPV, by contrast, carried zero risk of reversion because the virus was chemically inactivated, killed with formalin. For a disease that caused such profound public panic, Salk believed the public could not tolerate any risk of the vaccine causing the disease it was meant to prevent.
So his perfectionism was applied directly to public safety.
Exactly. And that rationale maximum safety for maximum trust guided his entire testing phase. Once Salk had his prototype, the progression was deliberate and very visible.
The initial steps were taken with extreme caution.
Extremely. On July 2, 1952, Salk injected 43 children with the killed virus vaccine at the D.T. Watson Home for Crippled Children. He followed that up by injecting children at the Polk State School for the Retarded.
These populations were chosen, in part because they were institutionalized.
Right, so their health could be strictly monitored.
And then came the moment that truly demonstrated his faith in the vaccine, which also served as a powerful public relations move in 1953.
Absolutely. In 1953, he vaccinated his own 3 young sons, Peter, Daryl, and Jonathan. In the context of a disease that terrified every parent, this was a profound act of confidence.
He wasn't just a scientist administering a drug. He was a father staking his family's health on his research.
That silent testimonial resonated so deeply with the anxious American public.
And that confidence set the stage for the massive field trials of 1954, the polio pioneers. The scale of this operation is simply breathtaking.
It was, without hyperbole, the most elaborate public health program of its kind in history. The vaccine was tested on nearly 1 million school children across 44 states.
The logistics must have been a nightmare.
Unbelievable. Our sources detail the sheer human effort. The project required 20,000 physicians, 64,000 school personnel, and a staggering 220,000 volunteers, many of them local mothers who dedicated their time to coordinating everything.
And all of this was underpinned by a massive fundraising effort.
The March of Dimes campaign, driven by the intense personal connection people felt to FDR's disability, involved 100 million contributors. This wasn't a government operation. It was a deeply personal, grassroots response to a national tragedy.
That effort really highlights the unique and almost overwhelming place polio held in the public consciousness.
The fear was a palpable force. A 1954 Gallup poll revealed an extraordinary fact. More Americans knew about the details of the polio field trials than could give the full name of the president of the United States.
Wow.
Yeah. The extensive publicity, coupled with the profound existential fear of the disease, drove massive public support and funding, which totaled $67 million by 1955.
So the entire country, it seems, just held its breath waiting for the results.
And then came the announcement, delivered with almost papal solemnity on April 12, 1955. It was the 10th anniversary of Franklin D. Roosevelt's death.
And the verdict.
The vaccine was declared safe, potent, and 60 to 70% effective against type 1 poliovirus and 90% effective against types 2 and 3. The response was immediate and overwhelming.
Church bells rang.
Factory whistles blew. Salk was instantly hailed as a miracle worker, a national hero.
And the rush to vaccinate began immediately. This wasn't just a U.S. phenomenon either.
No, the Salk vaccine was quickly adopted by Canada, Sweden, Denmark, many other European countries, reaching about 90 nations by 1959. It's just hard to overstate the seismic shift in public health that this represented.
An age of seasonal terror was ending, and Salk was catapulted into a level of global celebrity few scientists have ever experienced.
And that transition from a focused, private laboratory scientist to a global public icon was sudden, jarring, and for Salk, deeply unwelcome. This brings us to the moment where his moral compass was placed under the greatest scrutiny.
The sources capture the immediate onslaught perfectly, quoting television personality Ed Murrow, who famously told Salk shortly after the announcement, "Young man, a great tragedy has befallen you. You've lost your anonymity."
And Salk felt that loss profoundly. He was, quote, profoundly disturbed by the fame, which he considered utterly inappropriate for a dedicated scientist. His focus was on the work, not the accolades.
Overnight, his life changed.
Completely. He received a presidential citation, 4 honorary degrees, numerous foreign decorations, and thousands of letters daily. He really struggled to reconcile the public figure with the private researcher.
And the professional consequences were significant too.
They were. He reflected 25 years later, in 1980, that his relationships with colleagues were forever altered. He said with some sadness, "I am a public figure, no longer one of them." He was set apart.
Placed on a pedestal where genuine collaboration becomes far more difficult.
Right. Yet, despite the burdens of fame, the descriptions of Salk the man reveal a fundamental indifference to the material gains that usually accompany such success.
The New York Times described him as having great warmth and tremendous enthusiasm.
But crucially, having very little perceptible interest in the things that interest most people, such as making money. He openly dismissed wealth as belonging in the category of mink coats and Cadillacs unnecessary.
That inherent disinterest in personal enrichment leads us directly to the moment that defined his moral legacy, the patent question.
When Ed Murrow asked Salk during a televised interview who owned the patent to the vaccine, Salk delivered the iconic response that cemented his reputation as a humanitarian hero.
The famous line.
He said, "Well, the people, I would say, there is no patent. Could you patent the sun?"
That reply is just beautiful in its simplicity. And when you look at the financial reality, the magnitude of that statement becomes staggering.
It does. Had the vaccine been successfully patented, sources calculate its potential worth at $7 billion. That is the fortune Salk, the National Foundation, and the University of Pittsburgh collectively walked away from.
For the sake of universal health.
Yes, but this is where we have to introduce the critical nuance that elevates this story from a simple heroic narrative to a profound insight into scientific ethics and law.
Okay, because I think many people assume that Salk could have patented it but chose not to, purely out of moral conviction. The sources suggest a more complicated picture.
They absolutely do. While Salk's moral commitment to universal non-proprietary distribution was unquestionable, the technical feasibility of patenting was actually quite complex. The National Foundation and the University of Pittsburgh did investigate patenting the vaccine.
So it wasn't immediately discarded.
Not at all. However, their patent attorney determined that the vaccine was not a truly patentable invention.
What was the specific technical sticking point?
The attorney concluded that Salk's specific techniques, using formalin to inactivate the virus, were deemed not entirely novel in the field of virology, given earlier influenza work. Therefore, the scope of any claim they could make would be extremely narrow and ultimately of doubtful value in court.
So it was more of a careful application of existing knowledge to a new threat.
Exactly. Not a fundamental, brand new scientific leap, which is often what robust patents require.
So we have this powerful confluence. Salk's deep-seated philosophical resistance to intellectual property ownership when it concerns saving lives,
combined with a pragmatic legal determination that the invention lacked the radical novelty required for a massive patent windfall.
That dual explanation is critical.
It is. Salk's moral choice was perfectly reinforced by the technical limitation. It meant there was no legal or philosophical obstacle to maximizing global distribution immediately,
Which allowed the vaccine to be manufactured by numerous companies without proprietary legal battles.
Right, which is what facilitated the speed with which the vaccine reached 90 countries within 4 years. It validated his commitment to global public health over any form of institutional or personal financial gain. His vision was a global one, and the patent decision ensured the delivery mechanism matched that vision.
Once the immediate crisis was managed and Salk had navigated the public spotlight, his next great ambition wasn't another vaccine, but the creation of an intellectual ecosystem.
He sought to build a physical and philosophical home for his broader vision of helping humanity in a larger sense.
And with the continuing support of the National Foundation, he established the Salk Institute for Biological Studies in La Jolla, California, which opened its doors in 1963.
This was the true realization of Salk the thinker.
This was never intended to be a typical lab, was it?
Far from it. Salk envisioned it as a modern Socratic academy, a research complex dedicated to investigating biological phenomena from cell to society.
From cell to society. That phrase perfectly encapsulates the scope.
He wanted to move beyond the narrow focus of specific diseases and understand the fundamental systems of life itself, from genetics and immunology right up to human psychology and culture.
He explicitly hoped the Institute would create a favorable atmosphere for cross-fertilization between the, quote, supposedly alienated two cultures of science and humanism.
He was deeply worried that pure science was becoming too isolated from the ethical and philosophical questions that guided human life.
And that philosophy was literally built into the architecture.
It was. Salk collaborated extensively with the renowned architect Louis Kahn. The design of the facility is iconic, two parallel blocks of concrete buildings facing the Pacific Ocean.
Separated by that travertine marble courtyard, the river of life.
Yes. But the most telling detail, according to the sources, is practical. Kahn installed blackboards instead of concrete facings on the walls along the walks and terraces.
Blackboards on the outside walls.
Yes. The intent was to encourage spontaneous collaboration. Salk wanted scientists, philosophers, and humanists to run into each other outside the formal laboratory, to stop and spontaneously hash out problems right there on the wall.
An environment designed for dialogue and serendipitous discovery.
Exactly, rejecting the isolation of the traditional ivory tower.
And the talent he attracted was world-class, matching his ambition. Francis Crick, the co-discoverer of the DNA structure, relocated there.
Right, he served as a leading professor there until his death. Clearly, the environment was designed for fundamental, high-level thinking about human existence.
Which leads us directly to Salk, the biophilosopher. In 1966, the New York Times recognized this shift, referring to him as the father of biophilosophy.
This was his attempt to formalize his belief that biological insight, the deep understanding of evolutionary processes, had essential wisdom to impart regarding social, cultural, and political problems.
It sounds abstract, but how did Salk actually define this field, and what did it mean for the average person?
He described it as applying a biological evolutionary point of view to philosophical, cultural, social, and psychological problems. He went into extensive detail in his books, notably Man Unfolding and The Survival of the Wisest.
These weren't scientific papers.
No, they were philosophical tracts arguing that human success created new challenges that required a new consciousness to solve.
Let's spend some time on those core concepts, because they are crucial to understanding the man after the vaccine. What was his primary thesis in terms of human evolution?
Well, the foundational idea is the evolution of consciousness. Salk argued that through the evolution of consciousness, humans have become the process of evolution itself. We are the only species that can conceptualize our own demise and plan for the distant future.
Meaning we are no longer simply driven by raw, unconscious natural selection.
Exactly. We're now capable of imagining alternatives, making conscious choices, and proactively steering our destiny.
So we become co-authors with nature of our destiny, as he put it. That is a massive realization of human responsibility.
It is. It argues that our biology mandates our ethical action. And this realization drove his concept of the shift in human attitudes. He posited that humanity was transitioning from one epoch, he called it the A epoch, to a new B epoch.
Okay, what defined the A epoch?
In the past A epoch, defined by high mortality and infectious disease, man was rightly preoccupied with death control or anti-disease attitudes. This was the world he fixed with the polio vaccine.
And the new era, the B epoch.
He argued that in the future B epoch, our challenges would shift from high mortality to overpopulation and societal stress. Therefore, birth control would become more important, and collective attitudes would shift toward being inherently pro-life and pro-health.
So we move from fighting immediate threats to optimizing long-term vitality.
From crisis management to preventative holistic system management.
That reframing from fighting mortality to optimizing vitality feels particularly relevant today.
It does. And to achieve this healthier future, he stressed the importance of adaptation, cooperation, and collaboration. He saw these social actions as biological necessities for a species that now held so much power over its own environment.
Survival requires us to be wise enough to work together.
Exactly. The Salk Institute was, in miniature, an attempt to force that cooperation.
And this philosophical framework included a sobering warning about the risk inherent in progress. Let's talk about his idea of prudent risk.
This concept reflects the high-stakes decisions he made during the vaccine trials. He was fundamentally optimistic that diseases would be prevented, but he warned strongly against complacency. He famously argued that a risk-free society would become a dead-end society.
This isn't a call for recklessness, though.
No, but it's a demand for continuous, intelligent experimentation. We must be prepared to take necessary, calculated, and prudent risks, like large-scale vaccine trials that carry inherent uncertainty, provided the ultimate goal is the greater universal good.
Echoing his earlier moral commitment, did this dedication to biophilosophy mean he completely stepped away from the lab bench?
Not at all. He maintained an active lab at the Salk Institute, applying the rigorous methods he perfected against polio to new threats. He dedicated time in his later years to researching the immunologic aspects of cancer and autoimmune diseases like multiple sclerosis.
He was also actively developing his philosophical ideas.
Right up until the end. He was working on a new book just prior to his death, privately reported to be titled Millennium of the Mind. His life was a constant dynamic intersection of cellular biology and societal thinking.
Even after conquering polio and establishing a world-renowned institute, Salk remained focused on solving the next great global health crisis. Beginning in the mid-1980s, his attention shifted to HIV/AIDS.
This was a natural and necessary continuation of his life's work in virology and immunology, applying his expertise to what was then the newest, terrifying pandemic.
He co-founded the Immune Response Corporation, or IRC.
And he focused on developing an immunologic therapy called Remune. It wasn't a preventative vaccine in the traditional sense, but an immunotherapeutic approach aimed at boosting the immune response in people already infected with HIV.
That focus on therapy rather than just prevention shows his adaptability. He wasn't wedded to the exact mechanics of the IPV.
Absolutely not. Though the Remune project was eventually discontinued in 2007, 12 years after his death, it demonstrates his unwavering commitment to tackling the most challenging health crises of his time, long past the point where most scientists retire.
Shifting briefly to his personal life, we found some absolutely fascinating details that revealed the man behind the relentless scientist.
Salk married Donna Lindsay in 1939, right after graduating medical school. But the wedding was delayed and subject to conditions imposed by her father, a wealthy Manhattan dentist.
The sources explain that the father viewed Salk as a social inferior,
which was a common prejudice against working-class Jewish academics at the time.
And the conditions he imposed are astounding.
They are. The marriage came with two very specific conditions. First, Salk had to wait until he was officially listed as an MD on the invitations to lend the event professional gravitas.
And the second?
He had to adopt a middle name to improve his rather pedestrian status. He chose Edward. So the great Jonas Salk carried that middle initial for decades, partially because of his father-in-law's insistence on social pedigree.
It's a powerful anecdote illustrating the social barriers he faced, even as a brilliant academic. Despite these early social hurdles, his family life seems to have been highly successful professionally.
Indeed. He and Donna had 3 sons, Peter, Daryl, and Jonathan, all of whom followed him directly into science and medicine.
Peter became a physician, Daryl focused on vaccines, and Jonathan is a psychiatrist.
Yes. And after divorcing Donna in 1968, Salk remarried the French painter François Jolla in 1970.
It seems beautifully appropriate that the father of biophilosophy, the man who spent his life arguing for the unification of the two cultures, would ultimately marry a world-renowned artist.
Someone who was famously the former mistress of Pablo Picasso, no less. It truly completes the picture of a man dedicated to the full spectrum of human creativity and insight. He died in 1995 from heart failure at age 80 in Jolla.
And his dedication to the universal protection of children was unwavering throughout his entire life.
He campaigned vigorously for mandatory vaccination, consistently framing it not just as a medical necessity, but as a moral commitment that citizens owe to their society to protect the vulnerable.
And the incredible recognition he received underscores how profoundly transformative his work was on a global scale. He was recognized immediately, receiving the prestigious Albert Lasker Award in 1956.
And he was elected to the Polio Hall of Fame in Warm Springs, Georgia in 1958. But two very high civilian honors really stand out.
In 1975, he was awarded the Congressional Gold Medal.
And 2 years later, in 1977, he received the Presidential Medal of Freedom, awarded by President Jimmy Carter. The source is, quote, Carter's accompanying statement, which is perhaps the best summation of Salk's true value.
Carter said, "Because of Dr. Jonas E. Salk, our country is free from the cruel epidemics of poliomyelitis that once struck almost yearly. Because of his tireless work, untold hundreds of thousands who might have been crippled are sound in body today. These are Dr. Salk's true honors, and there is no way to add to them."
That quote shifts the focus from the man to the impact on society.
And beyond the medals, the institutional recognition cemented his legacy for future generations. Jonas Salk Hall at the University of Pittsburgh, where he conducted his pivotal research, bears his name.
As do countless schools across the U.S., and perhaps most importantly, his birthday, October 24th, has been named World Polio Day.
And even today, his legacy permeates popular culture. In 2014, on the 100th anniversary of his birth, a Google Doodle featured happy, healthy children holding a sign that simply read, "Thank you, Dr. Salk."
He is a figure that transcends specialized scientific history and enters the realm of essential global cultural heroes. The sheer volume and diversity of recognition speaks to how deeply his work affected the lives of everyday citizens globally.
Transforming paralyzing fear into enduring freedom, all while refusing to claim personal ownership of that freedom.
That's right.
This deep dive has shown us that Jonas Salk was much more than just the inventor of the polio vaccine. He was a philosophical thinker who deeply considered the relationship between science, humanity, and our shared future.
We've traced his evolution from a young man interested in things human, fueled by the competitive, publicly funded environment of CCNY.
Through his pivotal decision to pursue safer, inactivated virus research to help humankind in a larger sense.
This culminated in the massive polio pioneers trials and, most famously, his ethical decision to forego billions in profit, epitomized by asking, could you patent the sun?
His commitment continued in his later years, culminating in the establishment of the Salk Institute as a Socratic academy designed to foster necessary cross-fertilization between the rigor of science and the wisdom of humanism.
Right, to ensure that progress always serves the social good. If we connect this to the bigger picture, Salk dedicated his life to moving society from an era of death control toward one focused on pro-life and pro-health.
And his final work on biophilosophy suggests that human consciousness makes us co-authors of our destiny.
Provided we are wise enough to embrace cooperation and apply biological wisdom to our social structures.
This raises an important question for you, the learner, that connects his past triumphs to our present challenges. Given Salk's belief that a risk-free society would become a dead-end society, where do you see the most important intersection today between rapid scientific progress like AI or gene editing and the necessity of taking prudent risks for the greater global good while still maintaining the moral commitment to universal access that Salk exemplified?
It's something for you to mull over as you weigh the balance between innovation and immediate safety.
Think about that difficult balance between scientific ambition and public safety. A tension Salk navigated so expertly by choosing the safest vaccine mechanism first, ensuring the immediate freedom of a terrified population.
Thank you for joining us on this deep dive into the extraordinary life and unpatented legacy of Jonas Salk.
We hope this is giving you a fresh perspective on a true titan of science and philosophy.